Hello, my name is Rick Ochoa, student at Cal Baptist University in the Doctor of Public Administration program. This presentation is part of DPA 740, Collaboration and Networked Governance. The purpose of this presentation is to show the importance of applying public administration's core pillars to collaborative environments. So as we look at keys to effective collaboration, particularly within the context of government-led collaborative efforts, we see the idea of efficiency, which is one of the core pillars of public administration. We want to make sure that our operations and our processes are efficient. We also want to ensure that we have adequate representation. We want to represent our constituency completely and not just subsections of them. So to do this, we first need to identify stakeholders. We want a broad and inclusive set of stakeholders to incorporate into this collaborative effort. Then we need to establish clear lines of communication, which also help us establish clear expectations across the board for everyone involved in the collaborative effort. So when we identify stakeholders, we need to identify a broad spectrum of stakeholders. We want to be inclusive, and we want to make sure that when we're going through this process that everyone who's involved has a stake in the end game. When partners in a collaborative effort don't have a stake in the end game, then the effort isn't as effective. Then we can establish lines of communication. We want to make sure that it's well understood how communication is going to happen, who's going to be responsible for things, what the expectations are when we come together. But we also want to understand what the expectations are in between getting together. How do we communicate with each other? How do we get information across to each other? And when the collaborative effort is small, it's easy to get lines of communication across to everyone. But as we add stakeholders, and we do want to be inclusive, the communication becomes a lot more complex. So it's important to establish responsibilities. We want to coordinate communication across this collaborative effort, across this group. So in our example here, government organizations would probably be the top level facilitators for the communication to make sure that the effort is being united and going forward together. Once we understand what everyone's priorities are, we can identify where commonalities exist. And based off these commonalities, we can identify a common ground that can guide this collaborative effort. So it's important to identify what those commonalities are and set those as our expectations going forward. Now, as faith-based leaders, it's important to understand that we work within the context of a world filled with chaos. And as faith-based leaders, our convictions should be grounded in the strength that comes from our faith. As Bass explains, and I quote, "A leader relies on vision, self-confidence, and inner strength to argue successfully for what he sees as right or good, not for what is popular or acceptable according to the established wisdom of the time." As Christians, we apply this into our lives, like we find in Zechariah 7:9-10 that says, "Make fair decisions, show faithful love and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor, and do not plot evil in your hearts against one another." As leaders, we gain true convictions that can result in a balanced approach, driven not by personal gain, but by a higher purpose for the public good. So to sum everything up, public administration is based on some core principles. We call them the pillars of public administration. We focus on having adequate representation. It's one of our core pillars. We want to be able to represent the constituency as a whole. Whatever we accomplish, we want to do this in an efficient manner. And so we have to follow these processes to make sure that the collaborative effort, one, is effective, but we cannot forget our Christian faith. We're not guided by political interest or the whims of society. We have a grounding in our faith, and we have to balance our faith with providing valid solutions to the community. If we're able to accomplish this correctly, then we're able to establish effective collaborative efforts. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you very much.